What's going on, everybody? Teej back again with another video. Today, I'm here to talk to you about my Week 5 NFL Power Rankings, an exciting Week 4. Tell me some of your major takeaways and tell me how you feel about your favorite team heading into Week 5. Love to have your thoughts. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And, of course, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button as well. Let's waste no time. Let's jump right into it. So the Houston Texans fall to number 32. I am sorry, Houston fans, but as much progress I feel like you're making, you're still the only team without a win in the NFL. So because of that, you're still in a rebuild. Lovie Smith's still not your long-term head coach. You fall down to 32 with a loss. Then you have the Carolina Panthers, and what a mess of a game that was. Both sides looked bad between the Panthers and the Cardinals. Neither one of them really looked good. The Panthers just looked worse, and Ben McAdoo will no longer be referred to in his full title. He's the artist formerly known as Ben McAdoo. He is now Ben McAbum. Anytime I refer to him, it will be Ben McAbum from here onward. So he's just not doing a good job as an offensive coordinator. Matt Rule is like 1-26 in games where the opponents score more than 17. And this is the guy who fired Joe Brady last year for wanting to run the ball more with Christian McCaffrey hurt. So I'm just convinced this guy just doesn't know how to lead an NFL team. He's probably better suited to be at college. And, that's fine. There are plenty of coaches just like that. It's just unfortunate because there are good players in Carolina that just aren't having their value maximized. And, I still like what Phil Snow's doing on that defense. They play aggressive. They play fast. Frankie Louvu, that guy, you can't go 10 minutes watching, a Panthers game without hearing his name called out or seeing him make a play. So there's things to be excited about. Again, this is a super athletic defense. They're very violent, very aggressive. They're all over the field. They're just not properly coached. So I'm sorry, they're down to 31. The Commanders also just a mess. And, Carson Wentz has been more bad than good. And the thing with Wentz is, you kind of see it. Like that touchdown in the corner to Jahan Dotson, really stepped into it. He felt like that was one of the most confident throws I've seen him make this year. And he's kind of had that connection with Dotson. But, man, you can also tell when he's, iffy about a decision or, hesitant to, do whatever the situation calls for. You can just kind of see the confidence he's playing with. And like I said, it's been more bad than good. Man, Ron Rivera, I think he did a lot to kind of course correct this team from where they were at the end of the Jake Gruden era, but it's probably best for Washington to move on in another direction when it comes to head coach. And, maybe that Scott Turner is an interim. I know that offense wasn't great, but I'm still mostly, positive on what he's done this year with Carson Wentz. Del Rio, Rivera, two defensive guys, and year over year, that defense has just regressed, and you just can't have that with those guys and their reputation. Bears fall down to 29. It's just amazing that either Chicago or the Giants were going to be 3-1. Giants are on the screen. They're the ones who won. And it's just, man, the Bears just don't trust Justin Fields, it seems, yet. Part of that then is, the offensive line's not great. He's holding on the ball too long, and part of that's because the wide receivers just aren't getting open all that frequently. It's just a mess, and we'll have to wait till the offseason to see what this team wants to do when it comes to their franchise quarterback. What are they going to do with Justin Fields? Are they moving on from him? What's his value? There's just so many question marks. This team is going to be fascinating when it comes to this offseason, but for right now, they're just not very good. Seahawks do move up a handful of spots, and man, maybe I underrated, what Geno Smith could do with those weapons around him. DK Metcalf, aside of needing the cart to get to the bathroom, he was stellar, and he was making a bunch of big plays left and right. Tyler Lockett still got some game in him. Rashad Penny looks really good. And this offense with a stable quarterback has been okay. So the defense, though, is just an absolute train wreck. And, it's kind of amazing. Seahawks lines, not the game I would have anticipated with almost 100 points put on the board and over 1,000 yards. But it was, and both defenses kind of struggled. And also, I just want to put this quick disclaimer out. These power rankings do not operate on a record standing basis or a head to head. Just in case you're new here, I just kind of wanted to clear the air there. So the Lions are ahead of the Seahawks. I think if these teams had to play 10 times, I think the Lions would out more than the Seattle Seahawks would. Also considering Detroit, it doesn't sound like long-term injuries for a DJ Chark and an Amon-Ra St. Brown. Got a big day at TJ Hawkinson. They were missing some other pieces, so I think they'll be healthy once we get to week 5, and that definitely plays a factor here. And just basically the way I power rate this is okay, the team below this, do I think in this case the Seahawks, do I think they have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl? Now, granted, we're talking about the Seahawks here, so take it with a grain of salt. I'd say they have better chances where I stand on them right now than the Bears. So just kind of think about that. Each team up, I think we're getting a little bit closer to the real Super Bowl contenders. That said, I think everybody on this page is, obviously out of that type of running. So just had to get that quick disclaimer out. Moving on to the Jets. I mean, dude, that fourth quarter for Zach Wilson might give more things to be excited about for Jets fans than his entire rookie season did. And that is not to just totally crap on Zach Wilson, what he did last year. We're just starting to see that growth. First game this year, playing in Pittsburgh, that's no easy task. Now, was it perfect? No. But, even the interception to Cam Sutton, that was a play where Sutton was just reading his eyes, broke off his assignment, and came up with an interception. So I think the stats could be even better for Zach Wilson, because realistically, if Sutton doesn't make that play, I think it's just an incompletion, a little bit of an overthrow. But, dude, 2 10-plus play drives. I think it was 11 plays and 10 plays. And that second drive goes like 5 for 5 with like 57 yards passing. He legitimately orchestrated 2 needed fourth quarter drives to complete a comeback in Pittsburgh. If you're a Jets fan, that is exciting, and you got to win. They're still low on this despite being 2-2. You got the stolen win in Cleveland. This is the most impressive win this year for the Jets. Still need to figure out that offensive line. It's just really unfortunate, the injuries there. Elijah Vera Tucker's having to be a Band-Aid over at left tackle, which he was fine, but then it takes away somebody who should be an above average, up and coming, ascending piece that you're excited about at right guard. So. That being said, this is kind of why I always praise versatility in offensive linemen. I do a lot of draft content. Elijah Vera Tucker was somebody I was really, excited about. And I continue to praise players like that, where when you get in a pinch, that guy can play tackle. And in a case of, okay, I'm trying to find, my fifth left tackle this season or my second right guard. Okay, I'll have Vera Tucker move over to play tackle, stop the bleeding there, and we'll patch up that interior if needed. So excited to see where this Jets team moves forward. And can Zach Wilson do it 2 weeks in a row? It wasn't all pretty, but more in this fourth quarter than we've seen pretty much throughout his entire career. Falcons, solid win, and kind of controlled the line of scrimmage. Had some awesome performances from Chris Lindstrom, and, even Caleb McGarry with a pretty good day. And just with the Browns without Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, the Falcons pushed them back. I mean, they dominated the line of scrimmage when it was the Falcons' offense on the field. And, great running performances from Cordero Patterson. You get the big touchdown to Tyler Algier, who, in the preseason, a lot of people were saying, the Falcons could use a number 2 running back. Took Algier in the 5th round. I think that's a pretty solid place to take, a backup running back. And I thought he was a nice compliment behind Cordero Patterson. So hopefully we see more of that for that Arthur Smith run game. As much as he has gotten a lot of flack, that run game was really impressive and something to marvel at against the Browns. I'm hoping we see more of that throughout the rest of the year. So the offense, I think, is going to be able to be competitive with teams. It's just going to come down to how many stops they can get on defense. Then the Lions down just 1 spot. Again, I have them ahead of the Seahawks. I think if they played 10, 20 times, the bigger the sample you get, the more I feel confident that the Lions would win more often than not. Hopefully they can get back healthy. Starting to be a little concerned about Aaron Glenn, because if you've been around this channel for any sort of long period of time, I am the president of the Aaron Glenn fan club. Thinking he was going to get head coaching interviews next cycle, but man, that defense has really kind of struggled. And I think actually the other coordinator, Ben Johnson, has kind of become one of those front runner names, because 45 points on the board without Amon-Ra St. Brown and without DJ Chark, and with Jared Goff at quarterback. That's the type of stuff. They're doing creative stuff. They're finding great ways to get players into space, but it's not corny, and it's not overly complicated. It just kind of makes sense. And using Penei Sewell on pulls. You see that at college, but he's such a good athlete. Yeah, he could probably get away with it at the NFL level. They're just doing things slightly different, and they're forcing defenses to kind of take note, and that creativity pays off. And again, I think Ben Johnson has kind of surpassed what I thought Aaron Glenn would be as a guy who's going to be a hot name when we come to next coaching carousel. So Lions do lose. I'm still kind of excited to see what that offense continues to play at. I mean, they have certainly surpassed my expectations on that side of the ball. Let's move on to the top 24 now. Giants, they're 3-1, but let's still be honest with ourselves. The record is not the true indication of this team. The Giants are still not all that great. And let's find out who's even at quarterback next week with them taking on the Packers. So, Tyrod Taylor, banged up. Daniel Jones leaves the game. We got question marks there. So, yeah, the Giants won. Kudos to them. 3-1. Maybe it feels like Brian Dable's bringing a little bit more, functionality to this team. They're up a couple spots. They're into the top 24. Steelers choking one at home to, Zach Wilson. That's not a good look. But, the reason only going to fall 1, they're still ahead of the Jets. Yes, I know. It's, again, not about head-to-heads to me. I'm excited to see what Kenny Pickett, is obviously all about. I was somebody who had him at quarterback 4, and my QB rankings last year wasn't overly optimistic, and then, my favorite team drafts him, so interesting situation to find yourself in. And overall, I think I was, I was pleased with what I saw. 3 interceptions, but I don't really think any one of them were his fault. Hail Mary and a couple of drop passes. It's also nice to see, some improvement and some growth from Matt Canada. Saw a lot more end arounds, forcing defenses to play laterally, which, defend the field vertically and horizontally, make defenses defend every blade of grass. Those are huge buzzwords and, talking points I have on this channel. So excited to see what more that brings in, especially considering when Matt Canada was hired, I was like, all right, I don't know if it's going to be good, but he does embrace a lot of motion. So at least it'll force defenses to do just that and defend, every square inch on the field. Got a couple QB sneak scores for Kenny Pickett, which is not something, as a Steelers fan, we got to see a whole lot of with Big Ben, especially late in his career. So starting to see a little bit more out of the offense and the system itself, but I'm excited. It's just going to come down to Kenny Pickett, and, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I don't know. This could get rough real quick because of the upcoming schedule. So, not saying he's the savior. I think a lot of Steelers fans are expecting, some pretty big things right away. He may have looked good right away, but that still was the Jets. They have a good defense, but it still was the Jets, and you're playing at home. Now, let's see him do it in Buffalo, I guess, this upcoming week. Colts, they're just not good. Sorry, they're down just one spot, but this team's just not good. And the fact they were even favored against the Titans is kind of a little interesting. But man, that offense, lethargic. Jonathan Taylor hopefully can play next week. Waiting to see more and more injury updates throughout the course of this week. The run game's not there. The pass game's not there. The defense, this is just not necessarily Indianapolis Colts. And I wasn't crazy high on the Colts, but they were my pick to win the AFC South. So trust me, I'm disappointed. I mean, this team just unfortunately has not met expectations, and I'm kind of worried what that means for Frank Reich and his job security. Browns down 2 spots. Obviously you miss a player like Myles Garrett, and that's just he's one of those few non-QBs that really does. He can move the line, right? He can change the spread. And in this case, against Cleveland, they just could not control the line of scrimmage. And what should have been a huge advantage with, Jadeveon Clowney and Garrett as that edge duo against, I think Jake Matthews is solid, but Caleb McGarry's not been great in his career. So that should have been a point of an advantage. Instead, because those guys are out, it ends up becoming a point of strength for Atlanta. So it's not really the same Cleveland team we'll see week in and week out. And again, hopefully Garrett's able to come back after that scary, car accident. But this team just kind of lost one that they really probably shouldn't, and I wonder what that means when we get to playoff time, especially considering they're having to live life without Deshaun Watson for so long. This could be one of those games where it's the Browns missed the playoffs by 1 game. Remember when they lost to the Falcons? So we'll have to wait and see. Not saying that's going to happen, but this could be one when we come back to it. It's man, you wish you could have had that one, don't you? Pats are going to have stay put here at 20. Bailey Zappi wasn't unbelievable. But given the circumstances, Jim Nantz did a great job, or Tony Romo, one of the two on the broadcast. His first career NFL snap was inside the 5-yard line at Lambeau against the defense that I had ranked number 1 in the preseason. That's not easy. And it was a guy that lived exclusively out of the shotgun in college. So being under center in that situation, also very different. So, but he did just enough, kept the offense, afloat. Jack Jones was the guy that really kind of stole the show for me. I mean, not often do people get pick sixes against Aaron Rodgers. Not often do they do that at home. And it's actually the first pick that Rodgers ever had against the Pats. He's missed some games, but first interception he's thrown against New England. So that's really impressive. And, former 5-star recruit, the talent's been there. He's just kind of had some off-the-field issues, and he's 24, so he's a little older, and that's kind of gone back to him having to bounce around in college. But for a team that desperately needs a cornerback, Jack Jones might be the guy. So we'll wait and see. Maybe it was just a 1 week, really solid performance, but there might be something there. So if you're a Pats fan, I'd be excited about Jack Jones. And again, you went into Lambeau, you forced overtime. I'm not going to ding you. I'm not going to bring you down. And, you've given me more to be optimistic about with doing that alone compared to, the Browns losing the line of scrimmage against Atlanta and the Colts and what their seasons looked like, et cetera, et cetera. So the Jags, they lost. So I this is why I always say this channel is just kind of like a catalyst for a conversation. I say this at the top and at the end of videos. Comment your thoughts. I respond to every comment. And one of the comments I got last week was, this Jags team is not the same Jags team involved. And I'm like, yeah, that's a fair point. That being said, I'm not going to go as far as a top 16, top 10 team, because I kind of anticipated them to come back down to earth this week against Philadelphia. And they did lose that game after getting out in front with a big lead, and they did kind of have that late surge to make it a little more interesting at the end. But they still lost a game. Weather certainly played a huge factor. Lots of balls hitting the ground. Lots of fumbles from Trevor Lawrence. Does that play out differently in ideal conditions? I kind of think it does. But I did want to narrow the gap between the Jags. We haven't got the Titans there at 16, but I did want to narrow that gap. Currently, they're two teams tied at the top of the AFC South, and I do think this Jags team has improved to where they were last year. So despite the loss, I did move them up to 19, so they're now inside the top 20. Last week they were at 23. But that being said, I think we have to be careful just because the team's better than they were last year. And in the case of the Jags, even if they're okay, that's a huge step forward for where they were last year. Let's not crown them the champs though. Like, just because a team's better doesn't mean that they're elite. So I still think this team is in the middle of a rebuild process. Maybe a year away from being able to be really, really playoff competitive. They might win that bad division, but that doesn't mean they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. So top 10 I kind of hesitate on, but yeah, I'll put them in the top 20. I think they're getting there. And if I'm being honest, if you were to tell me in 4 months or whatever it is, if you were to transport back in time and get me where I am right now and tell me, hey, there's an AFC South team that's going to win a playoff game, just even one playoff game, I would just assume it's the Jags because they're the team with the most upside. And I could see, okay, maybe they stole the division and swiped the playoff game. I feel more optimistic they could do that than Tennessee or Indianapolis where they're at right now, and certainly more than Houston, only team without a win in the NFL. So trust me, I'm putting respect, and I'm seeing the Jags. They're getting better. They're still just not completely there yet. So they've improved a ton from where they were last year. They were, again, go back in this series, go back and check out my first power rankings, the week 2 NFL power rankings. The Jags were 32. So, after a disappointing week 1 against the Commanders, this team has come a long way. And again, I think they're a lot better than where they were last year. So let's not crown them champs yet, but yes, I recognize they are in a much improved team at 2-2 now. The Raiders come in at 18. They want a must-win game, so it's kind of hard to move them down, but you'll kind of see and understand why. It's a little bit of a cluttered and clustered middle of the pack here. It's kind of an ugly grouping in a lot of ways, but Raiders win a must-win at home. Need to get back on track. So give them credit there. They unfortunately do have to fall. Maybe I could keep them ahead of the Cardinals. That one's close. These two teams both kind of come into a spot where I thought the records would be better from both West divisions, and the Raiders and the Cardinals are just kind of the afterthoughts when it comes to the playoff conversation for me right now in those divisions. Things can certainly change throughout the rest of the season, but an 0-3 start kind of for me was like, okay, Raiders, that's too much ground to make up, and the Cardinals, I guess they're not too far out of it in the NFC West with everybody kind of at the same spot 2-2. But still, that team has just looked so dysfunctional. So even though the Rams have looked not great at times, and the 49ers have had ugly games, including an 11-10 loss to Denver, their ugly has not been as dysfunctional and discombobulated as Arizona. So hopefully that makes sense. I think these two teams are just kind of a little bit of a muddled mess right now. So I kind of feel like it's fair to put them right next to each other. Moving on to the top 16, that's where I have the Titans. And again, not a perfect team whatsoever. Caleb Farley continues to struggle. I like the secondary. They're not getting a whole lot of pass rush outside of Jefferson. This is just, again, an imperfect team that's 2-2. We still have so much to learn about all these squads. So let's give it some time. Yeah, it's been nice to see Derrick Henry and that running game get back going. So, that's been a nice little nudge and boost in confidence that I can have with this team. So optimistic to see what might be able to build on that. Hopefully it opens up the passing game, play action off of that. So again, we'll have to wait and see, but I still don't think this Titans team is all that great either. The Saints stay put at 15. They, double doink away from winning, one in London and comeback fashion. And in a lot of ways, I do account for injuries in this. Andy Dalton in a different way, I kind of think might be the best option for it's tough. It depends on how you look at it. Because I just don't think with Sean Payton there, that Jameis touch that we kind of saw at the beginning of last year, I think that's gone. Like, I think we're going to get old school Jameis. So the volatility at its best is better than Dalton, but at its worst, it's more costly than Dalton. So it's kind of a boomer bust proposition. So half the time it feels like Dalton's an improvement and the safer play, and half the time it's like, hey, well, you're not getting big plays. You're not generating those chunk moments that really win games, especially when you have a Chris Olave who can do that. And he's been stellar this year. So it's kind of tough to weigh how much of a loss Winston is versus Andy Dalton. But again, in a game without Michael Thomas, I think they had some moments there with Chris Olave. But man, I think they battled a team hard to the wire, and it's tough to do that in London early in the day here for everyone in America. So a little bit of a transition there too as well. So I'm not going to ding them this time. we'll see what the rest of Andy Dalton and what his, stay at the quarterback position, or if we continue to see it. Maybe Winston's back in the saddle for week 5. So just let me get a little bit of time. I do think I still like them a little bit more than the Titans. I love that defense on paper. It's still such a really well-rounded unit. So still things to be optimistic about if you're a Saints fan. But this is a team that feels like they're kind of hitting a breaking point for me, to where if the struggles continue, they might be making a pretty harsh slide down the board here. The Broncos come in at 14. Yes, they're ahead of the Raiders. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I hear you. But and they just lost Javonte Williams. This whole, what was it, 18 through 14, teams kind of underperforming, I think, based off a lot of people's expectations. I know there's plenty of people who had the Titans winning the division. The Saints were, I thought, a playoff team. I thought the Broncos could certainly be in the mix. I wasn't high on the Cardinals, but there's certainly fans that, all these teams were like, hey, they could be in the playoff conversation. And they have all kind of looked rough at certain moments in different ways. For the Broncos, that offense is still discombobulated. The Saints, it's like, okay, what is Jameis Winston? That's really what it's going to come down to. For Tennessee, it's like, Tannehill's had some struggles. The defense still isn't perfect. They're still a solid unit, but man, there's still some more meat on the bone there. And kind of going on, the Cardinals have been dysfunctional. The Raiders defense, secondary and specifically the offensive line, they all kind of have their flaws despite being teams that in and around the playoff mix. Dolphins come in at 13. Prayers up for Tua. He's already been ruled out for week 5, and hopefully he gets some time to fully get back to 100%. No medical expert here, so I don't know what that timetable looks like. Interesting situation. You've already heard enough about it. I'm not going to talk about concussions, as I'm not a medical expert, so I'll kind of leave that to those who are more qualified to talk about it. But I don't think there's a huge difference between Teddy Bridgewater and Tua Tagovailoa, but I think there was more upside with what Tua could bring and maybe grow into. But I think Teddy B will be able to run the offense to at least a solid enough level. I think he can totally be the Jimmy G for this Mike McDaniel offshoot of the Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco 49er offense. I think he'll keep him afloat, and then I think that defense is good enough to win games. Again, Javon Holland was awesome. He continues to be a really good player. So despite the loss, still excited to see this Miami team. Maybe it's not, the potential is not fully there anymore, but I still feel like this is a high floor situation, kind of like what the 49ers have. Cowboys moving up a couple more spots. Cooper Rush, 4-0 in his career as a starter. The guy just wins games. So credit to him. Obviously really impressive. But, now it gets interesting. Now him or Dak. Like, this is where the fun begins. Let the narrative kind of run wild here. So we'll have to wait and see. But getting Michael Gallup back as well. So this team's starting to trend in the right direction. And that defense is legit. In the preseason, I was talking and concerned about, I think this defense is due for regression. But since they've moved Micah Parsons to full-time edge, that's kind of counteracted the loss of Randy Gregory and then some, honestly. And the Trevon Diggs, like I said in the preseason, I don't think he'll come away with 11 interceptions, but he'll probably be a better coverage player. And that's exactly what we've seen this year. He's kind of taking that step forward to where he's truly becoming a number one corner. So this defense, in a lot of ways, only got better. We'll see. Through 4 games right now, they look better. Things can certainly change. But yeah, excited to see what's going to happen with this Cooper Rush, Dak Prescott, which, let me just, pick a side here. Dak Prescott's the better quarterback. Let's not go crazy. Cooper Rush, good as a backup. And that's great. He might, with a 4-0, start to his career as a starter, he might make some, like, Matt Flynn money for kind of no reason in a lot of ways. Flynn was more unjustified than I think Rush would be at this point, but nonetheless, this could be, backup quarterback fetches bag and then it doesn't work out type of situation. Rams, they're down 8 spots. Don't freak out here. They really weren't out. They shouldn't have been in the top 3 and to begin with. So it was one of those things where, like, now I feel like, again, 4 games is not a huge sample size, but it's like, that offensive line's a problem. And I think that immediately kind of takes them out of, front runner status. So that, after seeing it further, solidified, in my opinion, against the 49ers, they're down to 11. And they're right behind San Francisco. And it's going to be close between those two throughout the rest of the season. Feels like the Rams need another vertical weapon. So OBJ, I'm sure they're blowing up his phone right now. And it's crazy to be saying that because I was hearing this offseason saying, is Allen Robinson an improvement over Robert Woods? In my opinion, I think he kind of is. They have just not been able to get him the football reliably. So for a team that feels like they need a number 2 wide receiver after they just got Allen Robinson, that's worrisome for what that means for Robinson. But OBJ feels like, kind of the layup, fix here. So we'll see. I bet you Green Bay's probably blowing his phone up as well. So again, time will tell there, but still excited about the pieces of the Rams defense. I think this team's still going to be in the mix for the playoff conversation. They're just they weren't a top 3 team. And the 49ers, best done, and Deebo Samuel's him. I mean, that dude is just an absolute freak. And honestly, part of it is too, like, I think the 49ers are just like the exact team that can continuously beat up on the Rams, right? Like that run game just kind of grinds you down. It's never been a team that, Aaron Donald's an animal in the middle, but there have been times where the Rams have been a little susceptible against the run, specifically been a little bit weak in the middle. Had it Bobby Wagner, I kind of thought that would be enough, but we didn't really see that on Monday Night Football. So, we'll have to wait till the second meeting between these two sides, but I just kind of feel like the 49ers are a rough matchup for the Rams, and that's part of the difference there. Bengals with a Thursday night win. They're back in the top 10. They're at number 9. Wasn't necessarily, like the most unbelievable performance, but also let's just note, those all whites, those white alternate uniforms are fire. So as much as like teams love and embrace the all black kicks, and trust me, like the all black Cardinals, the all black Eagles, all black Falcons, I love all that stuff. I eat it up. I'm kind of excited to see this like all white, kind of uniform and with the white helmets too. Like, I think there's a handful of teams that could really make some clean looks out of that. So excited to see what potential alternate kicks we get there. But nonetheless, the Bengals get back on track. It felt like they needed that game to get back to 500 and kind of course correct after a bumpy start. Still concerned about this offensive line. Like Lyle Collins has just been outright bad so far. So for a guy getting paid $10 million a year and was supposed to be kind of the guy, the last piece that really solidified that offensive line, and Alex Kappa and, some of the other improvements across the interior, we're just to get kind of back to average. Lyle Collins was a little different because he's a guy who's graded really well for Pro Football Focus, and young, highly touted prospect before some of the, stuff, that he had leading up to the draft kind of bumped his stock down. But nonetheless, this guy has played really good football. And it felt like, okay, that's the other book in tackle. And now it feels like him and Jonah Williams, slightly above average guys with, an average interior. This offensive line's come a long way. We just have not seen that. And, Cordell Volson, like, he's really struggled. And again, that's the guy beating Jackson Carman, former second-round pick. Yikes. So, still things to be figured out. But, as long as Joe Burrow's there, as long as his wide receivers are there, like a lot of the pieces there on defense as well. So, very optimistic for what this team can be all about moving forward. Let's move on now to the top 8. Minnesota Vikings return to the top 10, as do the Chargers. Maybe not the prettiest of wins. Like the Vikings kind of have to play it close and ultimately prevail. But, Kirk's been kind of clutch, had some moments the last couple of weeks. So we'll see. Kirk Cousins thriving in a clutch situation for a 9:30 kick kind of just feels on brand. So, let me see it on prime time and I'll fully buy into it. But, got back on track. Justin Jefferson looked awesome. Cam Dantzler, been waiting for that type of game for a while. So, if he's out of the doghouse, that feels like as big of an improvement that quarterback room's had in some time. And, really unfortunate about Lewis Seen. So optimistic about where this team's going. They still need to find some pass rush. It's kind of weird that I'm saying this team's struggling on a consistent basis to generate pass rush, but we really didn't see a whole lot of that against the Saints. Chargers, they almost chargered it against the Texans, the only team without a win in the NFL. So not something you want to say, but they did hold on. They did prevail. They're still down Keenan Allen. I think that is a huge missing piece for this offense. So with that out of the offense, I think that is something you have to take into account. So tough spot. Chargers hold on and, trying to get closer and closer back to 100%. So I think it's just going to continue to take a little bit of time for team get back healthy again. But back in the top 10, the talent's there. Yeah, this is a team that should be here. Can they just stop freaking charging games? That's legitimately the only thing I have against this team right now is they continue to charger away games. But off of them, let's talk about the Ravens. Down a spot, game could have broke, in a couple different ways, if we're being honest. But, Bills make the comeback efforts. And, the fourth down decision is going to be one that's talked about. Also that, roughing the passer late. A couple things could have easily swung this game back in the favor. Maybe I have the Ravens at 2. I think them and the Bills are going to see each other again in the playoffs, and I can't wait to see it. Honestly, I'm here for it, ready to see it. So, don't freak out if you're a Baltimore fan. Yeah, you're down a spot, but I think you also showed that everybody was picking the Bills to win the Super Bowl, and we were right there with them. So, and doing so in unideal conditions too. So, wish I could have seen, a better second half of the Ravens, but you knew the Bills were going to turn it on eventually, right? So the Ravens got the big lead. Wish they could have held on, a couple different, decisions and I think executing better on that fourth down could have changed the course of the game. If the Bills don't get that roughing the passer, that could change the course of the game. So again, a couple plays away from taking that one from, everyone's Super Bowl pick at the beginning of the year. Bucks, tough one against Kansas City. They kind of make it interesting late, but I think this was, honestly, we'll talk about this more with the Chiefs. I think that was just a really good win for Kansas City more than anything. And also Tampa with everything that's going on with Hurricane Ian. Anybody who's affected by that, if you're watching this, seriously praying for you as well. Such a tough situation, so many different, bad outcomes. It's just tough. And I have family down in Florida, and right around the Fort Lauderdale area. So, I understand. I get it. So that for Tampa Bay was just going to be a headache. And it's like, oh, are we playing in Minnesota? No, we're back in Tampa. That also, I think, plays an effect. So I felt like this game was going to break one of two ways. The Bucs were going to be able to rally and kind of be that, that cause for hope and inspiration in Florida, or, the consistent changes and all the moving parts kind of has them come out a little sloppy. And I think that's kind of what you saw. Green Bay moves up to 4, and, I don't think the way they're winning games right now is sustainable, but they are winning games, so I have to give them credit there. And let me talk about Romeo Doubs. So, not perfect, right? You had drops the ball, he's coming to the ground in the end zone, should have been, game-winning touchdown right there. Has, a drop early, or the fumble early, or one of the two. I think it was a fumble, and it's like, man, he's just not making the plays needed. But, that's the same type of stuff we were talking about with Devontae Adams when, he was young. It's like, it's just not fully there yet. I just think with Devontae Adams, it was like, yeah, they still have other options. They don't have to, pepper Devontae Adams right now. Green Bay's in a situation where it's like, yeah, they need Dobbs to be the one. And that being said, yeah, he didn't hold on to it in the end zone. I think the harder skill is getting open down the field. So I'm optimistic with some time this can fix itself. So I'm not too worried. Now, if we get to week 8 and these problems persist, okay, then it's a problem. I think you're starting to see Dobbs become more and more the guy for Aaron Rodgers. They're starting to build upon that chemistry. He's getting open down the field. Hold on to the football, young man. And I think you might, I'm not saying he's going to be Devontae Adams, but I think he could be one of those guys where, like when you talk about Michael Pittman, that's a good young wide receiver. That he could be the main guy. You like to have some more pieces there, but good young up-and-coming wide receiver. I like him. He's a good football player. I think we could be talking about Romeo Doubs in the same way by the end of the year. So I'm optimistic. I could totally be wrong on this, but where there are some concerns, I think it's just going to take some time, and those growing pains will kind of go by the wayside. Eagles in the top 3. Look, this team, last undefeated team, you're going to tell me, hey, why aren't they number 1? If the Super Bowl is tomorrow and it's Kansas City, Philadelphia, I bet you the Chiefs are favored. And if they're not, no matter what, I'm taking Kansas City. And if it was the Bills, Eagles, I think the Bills would be favored, and I take the Bills. So again, think about it from a Super Bowl context, not so like head-to-head or record standing-wise. But I was the guy who said the Eagles were going to win 13 games this year. I was optimistic. They could win games in a lot of different ways, and we continue to see that put on display. So, with the rain and the conditions, they fall behind by 2 scores. First touchdown's a rushing touchdown for Jalen Hurts. Again, this team can just win in so many different ways. It feels like every stop you come up with, they learn, adapt. They're almost like, this sounds so nerdy, but if you're like a Star Trek fan, the Borg, they just learn, adapt, and get better drive by drive. So, liked what I've seen so far. It'll be an interesting and a different challenge this week heading out to Arizona. They're also still favored by 5, so that's going to be an interesting one. Can they? If they cover there, then I'm feeling like, okay, this team's hot right now. It's going to take a lot for them to kind of simmer down. Anyways, Bills down a spot. Despite the win, but that slow start was enough to be like, yeah, you lost last week. Slow start. That's not great. Now, I know the weather, obviously a huge concern and something that plays a massive factor. Totally get all that. But that being said, the reason they're number 1 is because did you see what Kansas City did to Tampa Bay in that defense on Sunday Night Football? When Kansas City plays like that, they're the number 1 team in the league. I don't care. I'm sorry. When that offense is doing that, Mahomes is just kind of working out to his right into the line of scrimmage and flipping it to the back of the end zone and finding C. Like when they're doing stuff like that, they're the best team in the league. So I think their performance kind of trumped the Bills, and a little bit of a slow start kind of, for me, was enough to be like, yeah, I'll make Kansas City 1. And coming off that performance, I think they totally should be the number 1 team in these power rankings. But it's certainly close between them and the Bills. If that's the AFC title game, I don't know what the line looks like, and I don't know who I'd take. I'd probably stick with my prior and maybe go Buffalo. But again, after what I saw Sunday, it'd be hard to bet against the Chiefs. So hopefully that makes sense for why I have them at number 1. But that is going to do it for my Week 5 NFL Power Rankings. Hopefully you all enjoyed. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Did my points make sense? Do you think Kansas City should be number 1? Love to hear your thoughts. It's a conversation down below. And if you think I got something wrong, let me hear it. Love to talk to you about it down in the comments section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me out a ton. If you're new around here, want to see more football content like this, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.